going to be similar. I'm going to talk specifically about communicating with data and with numbers. And we're going to try and fit this in 20 minutes, but I go fast because it's a very visual topic, so you can see a lot of stuff. Real quick about me, Brian mentioned a few things. I do data visualization and infographics design. That's what I do. InfoNewt is my company. I run a website called Cool Infographics. Conveniently, my book is also named Cool Infographics, so that goes together very nicely. Everybody here from the DFW area? I'm the organizer of the DFW Data Visualization Meetup Group. We have a little over 2,500 members, and we meet fairly regularly, not quite monthly, from topics anywhere from good presentation design to business analytics tools, all the way to programming in D3 and R and Python. So we have a pretty wide range of what constitutes data visualization. And then I teach a course at SMU that I'll mention at the end. So I'll jump into this. This is the research about why we have such short attention spans. Anybody heard that we have a shorter attention span than a goldfish? That's floating around. I don't even actually know if that's true or not. But what I have seen is that today's average citizen has to read what's called the information equivalent of 280 newspapers per day. So every one of you has to consume that much information every single day and decide, is it important? Do I need to do something about it? Can I just ignore that and throw that information away? We know from infographics that people only look for 5 to 10 seconds to read an infographic. They are not reading every word, they're skimming, right? They want the highlights, they want to get what they need and move on with their life. So I want to clarify what I mean by data visualization, because we are surrounded by visual information all the time, but I don't constitute all these to be data visualizations, right? So this one is a chart. Right, there are about 100,000 data points here in the 3 major stock market indices over a time period of about 65 years. Right, this is a data visualization. We have visualized the data. Here you go. Have fun with it. Make some sense of it. When we talk about infographics use data visualization as a tool, including, and in addition to illustrations and icons and text and the layout, to tell a more complete story. In fact, data visualization is a skill, it's a tool that's used not only in infographics, it's used in reports, it's used in presentations, it's used in dashboards, it's used in posters, right? It's used all over the place. So data visualization itself is a skill that many, many, many people need to be better at. The real challenge I find is that a lot of people communicate that there are 2 reasons to visualize data. One is what I call discovery, is when you're trying to figure out what is that insight, what can you learn from that data, from that information. And you may visualize that data in multiple different ways, you may drill in, you may try, how do you see this, and I may share this with some of my coworkers, right? So discovery is this process of finding insights. And then there's the other half, where you have found your insight, and now you need to turn around and communicate that insight to somebody else, generally to a non-data professional audience. Right? It might be coworkers, it might be customers, it might be executives, it might be releasing information to the public. Right? They're very different reasons to visualize data, and many people will take whatever visual they created in the discovery side and turn around and put it up on the projector and say, here, now let's communicate it to somebody. And that's very messy and very confusing to an audience. You really need to redesign your data visualizations with the primary purpose of communication when you've got a message that you want to tell. So this is the example I like to show. This is Where's Waldo. Everybody familiar with Where's Waldo? Right, this is what discovery looks like. Discovery is messy, and you start finding clusters of colors, and you start to see trends, and you're trying to figure out what's going on here. When you want to turn around and then show that to your boss and say, here's what we found, this is not what you want to show your boss. Because you don't want them to go through that entire process of discovery that you went through. That was your job. They just want to know what you found. They just want to know the result. Right? And so this is what I would show as discovery communication. You can still show all that data, but it's secondary. Here's Waldo. Here's what we're here to talk about, and here's what this meeting's about. Right? And so we've highlighted our insight, and this is what we want to show. Now, I hear everybody say that when you're designing a data visualization for communication, you need to know who your audience is. That's great and all, but I don't think that actually helps or changes how we design data visualizations. The primary thing we want to know is what decision are they trying to make. I don't care if it's an executive or a customer, if they're making a purchase decision, if they're making a strategy decision, if they're choosing what to have for lunch. right? They are making a decision that you're going to inform with your data. And that's what really makes a difference when we design data visualization for communication. Anybody heard that the job of data visualization is to simplify information? Anybody heard that? That's wrong. Your job is not to dumb it down. Your job is not to simplify it. Your job as a data visualization designer is to clarify that information. Sometimes that means simplifying and pulling stuff out. Sometimes that means putting stuff back in, putting in callouts, putting in text, putting in a description, putting in something that helps your audience understand that data. So it's a balance of both, where the intent at the very end is they're going to understand your information quickly and understand its meaning and how it applies to them and how they're going to make decisions. So a couple tips. Number one is focus on a key message. And what I mean by that is focus on one key message. I can't tell you how many clients I work with that say, well, we want to tell them these 5 things. Well, you have 5 seconds. How many things are you going to think you're going to fit in 5 seconds? You want to clearly communicate one key message. And if you have more, design separate ones. Design separate PowerPoint slides, design separate blog posts or press releases or infographics. But focus on one key message. And that's so important and so hard for so many people. But it's a matter of focusing because you were trying to communicate very quickly. 2, visualizing. Right, we're talking about data visualization, of course. That seems obvious, but there's a real reason that you should visualize your data. This is called the picture superiority effect. So if all I did was stand up here and talk for 20 minutes, and I had nothing for you to look at except me, right? 3 days from now, so by Friday, you would only remember 10% of the information that I told you. That's it, just 10%. That's true for text, and that's true for audio. However, visual is different. If I visualize that information, if I tie my message to a photo, to an icon, to a chart, to some type of visual communication, you're now likely to remember up to 65% of that information. And that's huge, right? Because you were trying to influence somebody's decision later, right? They're going to want to make a decision later. They're going to make a purchase off the shelf later. You want them to be able to remember whatever it is you've communicated with them. Now, when you visualize data, you have to understand that you're going to visualize more than one number. You have to put your information into context for the audience. If you don't, every member in the audience brings their own context, and as the data visualization designer, I've totally lost control of my message. So, if I show you that there are just over 3 billion people on the internet, and I put it in a really big, bold font on a projector on a big screen, it's still a number all by itself and you have no context. Every single one of you is comparing that 3 billion number to something you already know, and it's different for every one of you. So I've totally lost control. So I tell designers all the time that big fonts are not data visualizations, right? You will see it in PowerPoint. You'll see it in news articles. You'll see it in infographics and everywhere else that people just like to make the numbers big. It doesn't help. This is an infographic about how many users are on the top social media platforms. Right, and so Facebook at the top at 1.4 billion, down to Vine, now defunct, at only 40 million at the bottom. All the same font sizes, all the same rectangles. It's up to you, the reader, to read those numbers and do all those comparisons in your head. That's very hard, because it's all text-based. It's also tough to visualize a number all by itself. A bar chart with just one bar doesn't help either. Right, you need to have some context. You need to have something to compare that to. So if I compare 3 billion global internet users to the total population of the planet, a little over 7 billion, now you have some context, right? It's a little more than a third, not quite a half. We're doing pretty good. That's a lot of people, but we got a long way to go. And I've created that context as the designer. And whatever you choose as that comparison data changes how your audience perceives that data. So if I now change this to this blue circle, is 3 billion global internet users compared to the total population of the US, a little over 320 million. That's almost 10 times. Every man, woman, and child in the US, that's a lot of people on the internet. And that's a different context, even though the number's the same. Inaccuracy, and I have to actually tell people this, is bad, right? When you publish a chart like this, and I'll let you absorb that for a second, the bar chart has no bearing whatsoever on the data. And you will see this happen every once in a while. This is what it should look like. People are, in fact, worried about the Zika virus, but the bar chart doesn't show that. You have to be accurate, and you've got to think about that. And once you start seeing it, you will see it everywhere else. And I say accuracy is the most important aspect because of that picture superiority effect. The fact that people remember your visual information, they're 65% more likely to remember it. They are 65% more likely to remember you messed it up. And you will hurt your credibility just as much as you could help your credibility. It happens all the time. That is not what 80% looks like. That is not what 20% looks like. And people just naturally assume you're going to move on. You only got 5 seconds, right? You're going to move on and assume that the visuals match the data, and they really don't. Pie charts are especially hard for some reason. The golden rule of pie charts is they have to add up to 100%. If your pie chart doesn't add up to 100%, what are you doing? Step away from the computer. This is data. This is survey data where it's like check all that apply. Has no bearing whatsoever. Has no business in a pie chart because it doesn't add up to 100%. It should be something like this, like a bar chart. So your credibility is defined by how you visualize your data. Because you mess it up, you're going to hurt your credibility as much as you can help it. 3D charts. I know a lot of people love 3D charts. 3D charts are bad. 3D charts skew the data and visually distort what you see. So in this pie chart, this blue pie slice of 29%, there are actually more blue pixels on the screen than there are purple pixels at 35%. So you actually see this as a larger pie slice than that visually. And so you don't actually understand the difference in the relation between those. This green bar in the back and this green bar in the front are the same number. But this green bar has 30% more pixels on the screen, right? It looks bigger because of the perspective skew of making it towards your direction, right? Don't design 3D charts like this. Just don't do it. Anybody know what a non-zero baseline is? Non-zero baselines are when the y-axis doesn't start at 0, right? And so the chart is correct. Right, it's showing comparison between 35% and 39.6%. And they have correctly identified the y-axis. Right, there's nothing technically wrong, but it skews the data. Right, even though this tax increase is only going to go up by 4.6%, it looks like 6 times an increase. When in fact, this is what the actual chart looks like. And when you look at it, it's a much different perspective. Right, it's going up, but it's not going up by 6 times. It's crazy. Simplify does come into this, right? Because complexity is bad. Don't ever design a pie chart like this, ever. There's just so many things wrong with this. But when I say simplify is part of data visualization, it is. You want to reduce any, what I call visual noise that's distracting from your key message because you chose your key message up at the front. Reduce text, pull out colors, pull out any clutter, pull out any lines, grid lines, pointers, whatever it takes. And even reduce data. If there's data there that's not relevant to your key message, get it out. Try to simplify your chart as much as you can. This is a template, right? So when you hit make me a bar chart in Excel in this case, this is what pops up. But this is just a starting point. And so many people hit the chart button, the data's in there, and they think they're done. I can take this chart and clean it up and turn it into this chart, which is much more relevant to the data. So this is store openings for Lowe's and Home Depot. I've removed a lot of what I call the visual noise, a lot of the grid lines, a lot of the axes, the color key on the side, and colored the bars to actually be related to the logo colors, so that now this bar chart is directly related to the companies I'm talking about. This takes about 10 steps in Excel. I never left Excel. This is not like go into Adobe Photoshop and make some major changes. It's just using the tool you have, but customizing that data visualization to what tells a better story. Apple is the king at this. Right? If you watch their keynotes, this was when they launched the iPhone 7 a few years ago, and they were showing the processor power and its increase. There are no grid lines, there's no y-axis, there are no data values here except one. There's only one number that they want you to look at, and that's their key message. They have simplified the hell out of this data, and they're really good at it. The last one is to use color with purpose. Don't just create a rainbow of colors. Colors actually mean something to your audience and helps your audience to understand your data. These are called pre-attentive attributes, and color is one of them. These are the visual aspects that your brain processes within nanoseconds. So it doesn't take your higher brain function to understand a difference in color or in size or in form or something like that. So we're going to do a quick exercise, and I need everybody to stand up. On the next slide, there's going to be a grid of numbers. I want you to count how many times you see the number 4. And when you have an answer, keep it to yourself and sit down. So how many times do you see the number 4 in the grid of numbers? And I'm timing you. Just 10 seconds. 14 or 15 seconds, okay? That's text, that's hard. So what did you guys come up with? 8. Anybody come up with something that's not 8? 9, okay. I will say it's not a trick question, the one in the title doesn't count. It's in the grid of numbers, how many times? So the answer is 8. But as a designer, I can use pre-attentive attributes to make you process that information so much faster, right? I can use size, right? I can make the 4s big. How tough is that, right? This is the data I want you to look at. I can use opacity, so sort of like I did with Where's Waldo, I made everything else semi-transparent or gray in the background, my data pops out. I can use color, obviously, we're talking about using color with purpose, I can make them red. And red specifically is a very bold highlight color. It literally looks like it's closer to you in your visual context. And then I can do callouts, I can use arrows, I can use circles, I can call them out and say, this is where I want you to look. I can put them all together, right? I can make them red, circle them, and make everything else gray. Right, and just make it super, super, super obvious that this is what I'm trying to do. So how do you do this in a chart? How do you use pre-attentive attributes in a chart? So this is a chart, the default chart in Excel for skin cancer rates in these 4 countries. And it colors every series of data, and it creates all of what I call visual noise. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And there are different ways and different opinions, and a different designer may come up with a different way to improve this chart. But this is how I improve this chart. Right, and so here, I've changed it to a line chart because it is a time series over time, so it's easier to read as a line. I've gotten rid of the grid lines, I've gotten rid of the color key legend. I got rid of most of the dates on the x-axis. I don't care where 92 specifically is, I just need to know the overall date range. And I have colored specifically Australia. Australia is the story here. Right, Australia has the highest skin cancer rate among these countries, I think, in the world. And then these other countries, I've grayed them out. So they're here as reference, but they're not the story. Even though Excel wants to color every single thing a different color, I have purposely grayed those out. And so this tells a better story. And it takes 10 to 12 steps in Excel to take this and turn it into this and use color specifically to draw your reader's eye to the information you're trying to convey. This is how the New York Times does it. When Supreme Court Justice Scalia passed away, they mapped out his judgment history for his time on the bench. You see all the other Supreme Court justices, and there are smaller, fainter lines in the background, because obviously this is a story about Justice Scalia, and it tells that really well, and it draws your eye specifically to his information. Again, discovery, do whatever you want, you're messy, you're in the data, you're the one analyzing it, it'll be bright and colorful, but when you want to communicate to somebody, make sure that you are highlighting what it is you want to communicate and specifically get them to look quickly to the data that you're trying to convey. If this is your default chart, pick your key message, clean it up, put the key message in the title, title matter. Use the title to hit your audience over their head with your key message. Clean it up, and then highlight your major key point. So 5 things. Focus on a key message, visualize your data, because you want to tap into that picture superiority effect. Be accurate, so be careful about how you visualize your data. This is the simplest part. Reduce as much visual noise as you can to remove distractions, and then only use color with purpose to draw your audience's attention to specific points in your data set. First chapter of my book is downloadable for free as a PDF at Infographics.com. I've got one copy if anybody wants to page through it. Like I said, if you're in DFW, which I think everybody here is, this is the meetup group. It's free to join, and you'll get email notices when we have new speakers come in. And then I am teaching this class, Data Visualization, Infographics, and Dashboard Design at SMU. I teach it in the spring and in the fall. It actually starts tonight for the spring semester, but it's a 6-week course in the evening, so it's 1 night a week for 6 weeks.